a book I co-authored with Greg Olson. Anyway, but I remember when Snitch did that article, they had taken in the art department. I mean, they really had a great idea. It was very different, but I guess they weren't thinking in terms of the family. But when I got the case file, I got all the photographs and everything, and I wrote the entire thing from the case file. And I remember the editor looked at it, and he said, "This thing is really, well done, and you used, all your primary sources and all that stuff." And so the whole thing came from the case file. Well, and so did the photograph. So what they had done, the family, when this girl disappeared, this girl that was murdered, it was at the end of the year, and she had just gotten her picture taken, and they had turned in one of her yearbook pictures. You know how the family would get those pictures at the end. The students would buy them. It's not even coming out in the yearbook, but they could purchase copies. Well, they gave the police one, and so that became part of the case file, and the family never retrieved it. And so when they published the article in Snitch, they had a picture of a drive-in billboard, and they had put in the girl's picture on it, which was I thought it was an okay way to do the article. It was just, it's an odd way to do it, but it was interesting as well. And this was 30 years, exactly 30 years since the murder. And I got a call from the editor one day, and he said, "Kevin, where did you get that picture?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the family has called and they're very upset that we used it." I said, "Well, if they're going to be upset, they need to contact the Jefferson County Police Department because it's part of the case file." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Absolutely." So if they're upset with anybody, they got to kind of look at that. So here we go, 30 years later, and the family, and I'm never going to blame the family, never. They have their issues. They've had something horrible happen. But 30 years later, it kind of caught me by surprise. And so the only thing I could say to the editor was, well, we got it from the Jefferson County case file, so if they have any additional questions, just have them contact them. He said, "Okay, thank you," and then that was it. I never heard another thing about it. But whenever you deal with families of these things, it can be quite touchy. So that's the one aspect of writing true crime that is always a little bit depressing for me when I hear where families are upset. And they don't really get upset with me. I mean, this one on this case, the published here, it was, and frankly, the man said some things to me that were not nice over the phone, and I just let it go. But, what are you going to do? And so you kind of put in a position, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's one of the cases in there that, most people probably aren't familiar with, but there's some quote-unquote big names in there, too, including one that you're an expert on, and Richard Chase, but, Richard Ramirez, and then the Gainesville Ripper as well. Talk about some of those instances that are kind of covered in the book.
Well, all of those are very odd cases. The Richard Ramirez case, he was known as the Night Stalker, and I've been able to speak to a couple of detectives that worked that case, not for the writing of this chapter, but when I was contacting them because they had worked other cases that I was trying to obtain information on, and but they're nice guys, and I remember I picked up a book. Of course, if you'll notice the book, I get a lot of my information from Philip Carlo's, the late Philip Carlo. He produced an excellent book called The Night Stalker. It was his breakout book, by the way. That book did for him was like what the Bundy murders did for me, and it put me on the map in true crime. Well, that put him on the map in true crime, and I would highly recommend that book. It's great. Anyway, so I take from his book, I take from newspaper accounts and other sources, and the story of of Ramirez is one where the guy was, he grew up in a family in Texas. These people were, legal immigrants, and they had come to the U.S. The parents were hardworking. He had some siblings and stuff like that. Ramirez had a couple head injuries when he was a kid. Knocked himself out a couple of times. One seemed to be kind of serious. I don't believe he had any brain tumor or anything from that, but and they don't necessarily think his eventual outcome contributed. Those head injuries contributed to what he became, but yet they did happen. So I do mention that. But anyway, Ramirez became heavily in drugs as he grew up, and he got into Satan worship, and he was a really slick burglar, and he was burglarizing homes in his hometown in Texas. And then when he moved out to L.A., he started doing the same thing, but out in L.A. he kicked it up to murder. And he was another one of these guys that loved to get through doors that were left open or windows that were left open that he could, shinny through, and he would do these horrible, diabolical things. And there were times though when he would almost always kill, the male. He would render them, unconscious, or he would shoot them in the head and kill them immediately, or they might die later. But sometimes he would let the women live. You'll notice this. And after he, of course, would almost always sexually assault them, and he would burglarize the house while he was there. But he would sometimes allow these people to live, especially if they had kids. But sometimes, he wouldn't. And there was a story in there about he had burglarized these folks' house like a year before, and she was an attorney, and the husband did something else, and he had he purchased some weapons, so they were well prepared if anybody came back. He had a handgun, she had a .45 caliber handgun, and they had purchased a shotgun. Now, what they did was they kept this shotgun loaded under their bed, just in case that burglar came back and tried to get in the house. They could blast him with it. Well, there's an old saying, and I like to say it, that they say in the military, you need to keep your you-know-what wiretight at all times, which is another way of saying you can't ever let your guard down, and you got to be consistent in what you do every day of your life. And when it comes to your safety in your home, it's consistency that will pay off, just like training pays off. Doing the same thing every day for your personal safety will pay off. And so they always had this thing loaded. Well, the grandkids had come over, like over the weekend, and the dad did the granddad did the kids did the right thing. He unloaded that shotgun just in case the kids would. I mean, you know how they are. They'll start rooting for stuff, and that's how people get killed. But when the kids went home, he dropped the ball, and he failed to reload the shotgun. Well, Chase gets into their house, and he shoots the husband in the head, and he's not dead yet, but he's incapacitated. And he goes in and he beats up the wife a little bit, and then starts going through the drawers because he's a drug addict. He needs the money. He needs to sell stuff. He's got a fence or two that he sells stuff to. And she pulls out the shotgun. He turns around and sees that she has cocked it. She pulls the trigger, and it just clicks because it was empty. Well, at that point, I think he had every intention of letting her live. Of course, he killed her, and then he gouged out her eyes. But now here's the thing. It's not that just so she was killed. If that shotgun would have been loaded, she'd have killed Ramirez. She'd have blasted him all over that wall. And there wouldn't have been any more Ramirez victims. So that would have been a payoff, not just for her. It would have been a payoff for everybody he killed after that. But he didn't reload the shotgun. The security aspect of it slipped his mind. And sometimes when it slips your mind, you're going to pay for it. So that's why I always say consistency. I carry a gun legally every day. I carried a gun before it was legal. And if they ever outlaw it, I'll still carry a gun. It won't matter to me. Bottom line is I do it every day. I am consistent. I consistently lock my doors. I do the same thing every day for safety, just in case one of these days something turns out to be different. And if it does, I can be ready for it. So that was a perfect example of letting your guard down. They had done the right thing almost every day, but because he failed to reload that. So you see that, it happens. It makes a difference. So, and like I say, I don't think he would have killed her, but of course he did after that. He was absolutely enraged over that. And but again, so, and this is so funny because he used to make people swear to Satan and all that stuff. And when right when he was being captured, because they found out who he was, and they had a bunch of billboards and stuff, and newspaper sketches and composite drawings. And when he got back into town, in downtown L.A., people started pointing at him, and they ended up chasing him. And in one neighborhood, they were beating him, and he was getting bloody, and he was sitting on a curb, and the patrol officer rolls up, and he gets out, and he's walking towards Ramirez, and Ramirez says, "Thank God you got here." So in that moment, yeah, he's not saying thank you, Satan. I'm so glad Satan sent you. He said, "No, thank God you got here." Anyway, but yeah, it's a strange case, and so Ramirez took opportunities, and he liked going through. He didn't want to have to break in and do anything serious. And here's another thing: what people need to do. We don't have a sliding glass door in our home now, but we used to live in a condo where we did. And what you need to do is put a bar down there so that the door cannot slide. Okay, so if they're able to jimmy a lock, they won't be able to slide and come into your house. So that's another thing that people need to do. And there's been a couple of people I write about in the book that failed to do that, which made entry into the house far simpler. And the only way to get in a sliding glass door, if you've got that bar in there, and the bar could be wooden or metal or wood. I mean, a wooden bar is fine. You just measure it to the right thing, cut it off, and place it in there. There's no way you can open that door. You can't open it. You have to shatter the glass, which most people will not do because it makes too much noise. So, again, do everything you can to lock up your home. Yeah. So that's the main thing. But most people aren't really thinking about that. They're just going about their daily lives. Everything is normal, and they just and they believe it'll stay normal. And for many, it will, but for some, it won't.
Yeah, and the sliding glass door thing, I'm pretty sure Danny Rolling was one of the ones that took advantage of that, didn't he?
He sure did. Both Ramirez and Rolling, yes. Absolutely. Yeah, it was a terrible. And those murders at Gainesville are just absolutely diabolical. Anybody that reads that will, and Danny Rolling, he's a loser, first of all, and he loved creating those murders. He would think that it gave him status, and it's just. They were just diabolical. I mean, he left one woman. He had, of course, murdered her. And he had he actually had left the place, but he came back because he thought he had left his wallet there. And while he was there, he sat her on the side of the bed, and He cut her head off.